Hello, I'd like to draw your attention to sitting down and getting ready for another wonderful occasion. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight to listen to Valerie. She's has been here before for the Jung Society, and we value her coming along. This light in this room is not very good, but we hopefully will do. Valerie has lived, worked, and offered a bridge through her writing and speaking between Western medicine as a speech pathologist and educator. So I'm finding it hard to read this fine print. Eastern medicine as a yoga practitioner and Indigenous traditional medicine as a learner and a biographer with traditional medicines, men and women. She encapsulates her meaning and purpose in speaking, writing, moving truthfully, stories, voices, and has found most unexpectedly Canberra to be a home. Well done, Valerie. It's lovely to have you here tonight, and it's great. And we look forward to hearing from you. And also, Valerie has written these books, and they're over there, and you can talk to Valerie about them. And 30 days is these two books. So if you like to buy them, you can talk to her when we have the session. We have some time. So we now would like to welcome Valerie to come and talk to us.
Okay, we better get the sound right first. Is the sound okay? Okay. A little bit soft? I don't know what to do about that. Speak up. Oh, okay. Right. Well, welcome everyone to the presentation, which I have called Home, Unhomed, Rehoming, and Jung. So thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for listening. First, an acknowledgement. Oh no, sorry. No, not yet. I was looking to see if you were there. I acknowledge that this land of Canberra and the ACT was first and always will be home for the Ngunnawal people, past, present, and future. I acknowledge that the Ngunnawal people have been unhomed as a result of we non-Aboriginal people arriving to make a home here, and that the Ngunnawal people continue to strive to rehome on this land as we now also are. I hope to facilitate this evening to be an exchange and sharing. As I am not a Jungian analyst, rather I'm setting out to bring Jung's thoughts and studies to the topic. I welcome the knowledge and thoughts you Jungian analysts have to input. So, what is home? These are some of my thoughts and sentiments from my reading and life experiences. Where you feel belonging, where you are received, born, gives you belonging and can be different from your heart's belonging or longing for a particular place to be home. Where you feel safety, solidity, security, sovereignty, and acceptance. where you feel valued and nurtured, and where you can nurture, where you can stake a claim of having some knowledge of land, of spirit, of culture, and of your identity, and where you feel confident to be. I recall my last presentation here concerned synchronicity. Well, I was having coffee in a random coffee shop, and there beside me was a Canberra magazine from 2018. The whole issue concerned home. These were the home thoughts they reported from a random survey of Canberrans in the street. My happy place, where I have a feeling of coziness, comfort, well-being, and contentment, where I can celebrate the everyday and be in the moment of being home, where my hope is restored, and where I can offer hospitality, meals, gifts, and storytelling. And here's another home thought from the website homestratosphere.com. Home is the tranquility we return to when the world turns into confusion. Any other thoughts on what is home? Perfect. And how many times have we come home and closed the door and gone, home? Anyone else? Okay. Professor Claire Cooper Marcus, an architect professor, has studied the human aspects of architecture, public spaces, and landscape architecture at the University of California in Berkeley. She's written extensively about the relationship between dwellings and the people who occupy them. Her book, House as a Mirror of Self in 1995, explores the meaning of home as a place of self-expression, as a place of nurture, and as a place of sociability. Marcus is not writing about homes in terms of floor plans, architectural styles, closet space, or structural stability. She writes of the ways these factors reflect self-image and emotional well-being. That's resonating with you. Thank you. Let's visit Homer's Odyssey. K.S. Franklin, in the Witherspoon Institute Journal 2017, writes this about what Homer's Odyssey says about home. The island of Ithaca symbolizes home for Odysseus. Here, he can share his life with his beloved wife and son, enjoy the wealth that he has earned, eat the food of his youth, even sleep in the bed that he built, and where he can offer hospitality, meals, gifts, and storytelling. This book, The Odyssey, translated by Robert Fagles, is my source for the parallels I will be putting forward between the Odyssey and this presentation. Being an epic narrative, the Odyssey is a series of journeys of seeking and losing and finding, and seeking and losing and finding, marked by changes in fortune. In our context, could Odysseus symbolize humans collectively setting out to explore, conquer, trade, plunder, and colonize. Humans who have currently lost much of their knowns. Humans who are now trying to return to a safe known home, only to find it does not exist as they knew it, and furthermore, now exists with previously unknown enemies, COVID and climate change. Odysseus, used in the metaphoric sense of us, starts off in charge, wanting more, wanting new worlds, wanting new sunsets, as an admiral of many fleets, and then becoming a shipwrecked sailor, clinging to a piece of wreckage, the wreckage for us being Earth. Odysseus desperately wanted only one thing, to save his life and return home to safety, as we do now. A further parallel is that Odysseus's nature encompasses deceit in attempts to save himself and his crew, ships, and gold. We now find ourselves surrounded by truths hidden by our business and government leaders in attempts to save themselves and us, apparently. Now, consider the role of the sea god Poseidon in the Odyssey. His wrath blows Odysseus off course and lost. Currently, we are experiencing Earth's wrath, stirred into tsunamis, floods, storms, fires, and epidemics, to ensure a world of pain as the price for deceit and disrespect. Finally, Odysseus' journey home resembles our current rehoming, in that it has rejections to calls for help, loss of property, unfaithfulness for us, unfaithfulness to ethics, visiting the underworld, fires, epidemics, loss of jobs and well-being, and delusions of grandeur and immortality from some of our leaders. So, what does Jung feel about home? The psychiatrist C.G. Jung said this about where he would need to live. Quoted in The House of C.G. Jung, The History and Restoration of the Residence of Emma and Carl Gustav Jung, 2009. At that time, the idea became fixed in my mind that I must live near a lake. Without water, I thought nobody could live at all. He was deeply involved with the construction of his homes, both his primary residence in Küsnacht, Switzerland, and his retreat at Bollingen on Lake Zurich. In 1963, Jung wrote, "At Bollingen, I am in the midst of my true life. There, I am most deeply myself. At times, I feel as if I am spread out over the landscape and inside things, and am myself living in every tree, in the splashing of the waves, in the clouds, and the animals that come and go." More of what I learnt about Jung's ideas of home came from reading others' reviews and studies of his work on the topic. For instance, in Jung's Dream House and Discovering Your Own Archetypal Home, Stephen Farrar writes, "Our homes are amongst the most primal of our collective symbols. Our homes are our castles, our sanctuaries, irrespective of how modest they may be, they are sacred ground. The border of the home constitutes a boundary between me and mine and the world, the others. Its boundaries are designed to keep the unwelcome out and admit the welcome in by my invitation. In my home, ideally, I feel contained, safe, held, The home, symbolically, is an extended psychic body, a manifestation of my soul in the world. And this, from What Your Dream House Says About You, by Jackie Craven, architecture writer and poet, in a 2019 post. For the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, building a house was a symbol of building a self. In his autobiographical Memories, Dreams and Reflections, Jung described the gradual evolution of his home on Lake Zurich. He spent more than 30 years building this castle-like structure, and he believed that the towers and annexes represented his psyche. In The Importance of Home, C.G. Jung and the Importance of Home, Dr. Howland writes in 2019, Jung worked with both building contractors and landscape architects to build the kind of home that would work for his private practice and his family life, and to fulfill his soul. Both his homes functioned in a way like catalysts in helping him become all that he was capable of becoming. If we read between the lines, it is not hard to see that this process of building was also a reflection of his soul and his own inner landscape. For example, 10 years before starting the tower, Jung had a painful break with Freud that precipitated a period of disorientation and a huge uprush of the kind of unconscious contents he had witnessed in schizophrenic patients. Feeling that his experience was purposeful, he chose to submit to the unconscious with writing, art, and the effort to understand. Out of this phase of turmoil and uncertainty, his unique psychological insights were born. Paper and ink, he said, did not seem real enough to represent his discoveries. So in 1922, he purchased land on Lake Zurich for a representation in stone of his innermost thoughts. So far, we have explored home as a representation of feelings and longings. But where and what are the places of home? This saying puts forward a Zen master's conception of home. But do not ask me where I am going as I travel this limitless world, where every step I take is home. Not being Zen masters, I'm wondering how we feel about that one. Nature has long been extolled as home by poets, Buddhists, indigenous peoples, and more recently, the church, through groups such as the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change and Green Faith. Thich Nhat Hanh says, "Go home to nature and let nature heal you." And this from Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge and the Teachings of Plants. The word ecology is derived from the Greek word for home. Hopefully we feel, at least most of the time, at home in our body and our identity. And this again from Thich Nhat Hanh. Your body is your first home. Breathing in, I arrive in my body. Breathing out, I am home. For me, one thing I identify as is a yoga teacher. I am usually at home in my body. Hello, welcome. Another thing I identify as is a writer. I am deeply at home with words. I hope for you that you are at home in your body and identity or identities. Home, of course, is a physical structure, be it a tin shanty or a mansion. When I came to Canberra 4 years ago, I was regularly asked, "So where's home?" I had so much trouble with this question. I was born in Brisbane, but have not lived there for over 40 years. Few, even of my extended family, remained there, so I no longer have a sense of belonging or home in Brisbane. I had my married life and children in Sydney, but have not lived there for 20 years. This family now come and go from Sydney, so I no longer have a sense of belonging or home in Sydney. I have lived and worked in remote Indigenous communities all over the world, and whilst I felt connected and a sense of welcome in most of those places, and often longed for some of those places to become home, they did not. So I started to think of a geography in which I felt truly at home, and concluded that I most felt belonging and at home in Big Red Country, that is, the desert. So now, when asked, "Where's your home?" my answer is, I was born in Brisbane, had my family in Sydney, currently feel belonging and at home in Canberra, and my heart home is Big Red Country. I don't know if anyone else has a challenge answering "Where's your home?" Oh, good. I'm so pleased. I often wish I could just answer that in like one place name, but it's tricky to be honest about it when someone asks you, "Where's your home?" Okay. Anyone else got a challenge? Moving around a lot, feeling that they've come. Yeah. 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 Some people find it very simple just to say, "Well, born and bred in Canberra, that's it." And that's a good answer if that's your story. In Stephen Farrer's From Jung's Dream House and Discovering Your Own Archetypal Home, we find how Jung sees the physical structure of a home. Farrer says, as he, Jung, descends the various layers of his house, he is descending the layers of his own psychology, psyche, or soul. What he discovers is that each successive layer connects him with an earlier time in man's history and the history of his ancestral line. As Jung descended the stairs, it brought an increasing feeling of interconnectedness to his fellow man. He begins in his personal living space on the upper floor and ends under the house to share the prehistoric roots of all mankind. Jung put forward that level one, the top floor of your house, is concerned with your personal narrative, the one that governs your own personal life and life journey to date. Level two, the ground floor of your house, is concerned with the family you were born into. Level three, the cellar of your house, is concerned with the culture in which you live and are identified with. This could be the culture you grew up in, the culture in which you currently live, distinct cultural and racial groups in the country in which you live, considerations of communal or group subcultures, and so on. Level 4, the cave under your house is concerned with the ancestral line from which you emerge. This could be singular or multiple, depending on your personal ancestry. In the cave, you can reflect on the spirit of the people you are descended from. Jung's physical home. The Bollingen Tower, in appearance, is a small castle with 4 towers in the village of Bollingen, on the shore of the Obersee, upper lake basin of Lake Zurich. Jung bought the land in 1922 after the death of his mother. In 1923, he built a 2-story round tower on this land. It was a stone structure suitable to be lived in. A 2nd story was added after the death of Jung's wife in 1955, signifying an extension of consciousness achieved in old age. Slide 18. Moving on from physical homes, we can have a sense of home and can feel belonging, nurture, safety, and value when we visit or meet with significant people, in significant family groups and relationships, neighborhoods, communities, friendships, in groups with shared beliefs, interests, and passions. I have found, as you also must have, many community homes in Canberra. Perhaps the Jung Society is one for all of us here tonight. I powerfully experienced community as home in Design Canberra Week last November. Under the plane trees in Civic, the culture and craft of weaving was brought into a community weaving project called Belonging. Here, passers-by were invited to put their story threads on large freestanding weaving frames. Across the road at the Seeing Canberra exhibition in the Canberra Museum, which is still there, if you're interested, plates, boomerangs, Aboriginal weaving, photos of early churches, and contemporary representations of Canberra told of diverse and disparate homes on this one patch of ACT land. Back in Civic, I found the Trees of Hope installation, individual hopes engraved on shiny metal discs and hung on trees. They expressed ideas on home, unhomed, and rehoming, most telling of unexpected kindnesses and community goodwill from strangers in 2020. Razzle-dazzle, they caught the light, and dingle-dangle, they radiated spheres of light. Workplaces can give another sense of home, of belonging, shared purpose, of being valued and nurtured, where hopefully we feel secure, confident, and have some knowledge, all aspects of home. Another home is a spiritual one. These are some of my thoughts and experiences of a spiritual home. It gives a tranquil heart in the middle of a troubled life. It's made in openness, gentleness, and trust through graced glimpses of what brings peace. It's where wise awakening awaits. Some say this is answer to prayer. It's where truths not grasped by the mind but known by the soul live. We seek a spiritual home because we long for presence, whether with God, nature, or other spiritual beings. Then, in our spiritual home, we invite this presence in. Jung on God and spirituality. My source here is the Jung talk, Enigmatic Origins of the Jung Cult from 1999. Jung read widely in the literature of spiritualism and psychic research. His reading included Protestant theology, historical Jesus research, Christian mysticism, spiritualism, and the Swedenborg religion, a Christian church of the New Jerusalem. He absorbed the tradition of German romantic nature philosophy, Goethe and Schelling, and studied biology, the works of Lamarck, Darwin, and Haeckel. His research work in the sciences of the spirit was itself a sort of spiritual calling. Jung believed that the human race started out pagan and only later, having lost touch with its pagan roots, became civilized and Christian. Richard Knoll's two historical studies of Carl Jung and the origin of the Jungian movement provide us with some provocative thoughts. Jungianism is a religion, and at the heart of this religion is the notion of the collective unconscious. God is a mystery. When I speak of God, I always mean the image man has made of him. It would be a regrettable mistake if anybody should take my observations as a kind of proof of the existence of God. They prove only the existence of an archetypal God image, which to my mind is the most we can assert about God psychologically. I do know of a power of a very personal nature and an irresistible influence. I call it God. God is nothing more than the superior force in our life. You can experience God every day. The self might be called the God within us. For us, in the context of considering spiritual home, after reading all that, I was left wondering if God, spirituality, or religion provided any sense of home or belonging for Jung. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Looking at you, I know you might. Thank you. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Please.
Yes, I've just got a sort of anecdote. I was travelling with my son in South America, in Argentina, and we came across a little village in our wanderings, like home, you might say, except it had a sort of substantial cathedral there. And at the end, as I do every day, a whole lot of what we might call rural folk in black dresses and things wandered in and had a service with candles and incense, and the priest speaking in a mixture of Italian and Latin, which is curious to us. We just sat in the back and observed this. But it was obviously a profound experience to a lot of people there, very much a part of their home, of their self-image of their community and their spiritual identity. Now, I'm sure a lot of them didn't understand the Latin and so forth, or the origin of the symbolism and so forth, but the mystery and magic of it, which a lot of us from Calvin's sort of tradition have lost, was obviously very much a home experience for them. Something that they held on to in very precious fashion every day, in their mass at this time.
Thank you. Do you? Yeah. No, that's right. And so that is part of us feeling at home when we have that feeling of that. Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
It is all feeling, and it reminded me of that very core aspect of paradise, the garden. The garden where you have the garden, which is ordered, and you have the outside, which is chaos, which is impinging on. And that's true of the home.
Yes.
It's true of all those different aspects.
Yes.
You have to snap to the garden,
Yeah.
as well as being something. It's also dynamic.
Mm.
It's never just one thing. You always have to move towards it
Yeah.
or move away from it, because it is your choice. Is the home something that is your necessary choice?
That's an interesting thought, isn't it? I like what you said about the garden too, the inside order and the outside. And yeah, that's what I was saying before about the boundary of the home and inside and out. And
As well as there being a home, there's something that's not
yeah,
by definition.
the mortgage. No, I'm joking.
But the feeling you can have is also the feeling that you don't have, which is the absence, the longing.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you very much for sharing. Another home, culture. This from Life Science Contributor, not 2017. And I'll start to skip over all the words on the slides because I'm watching the clock. Culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people encompassing language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. The Centre for Advanced Research on Language Acquisition goes a step further, defining it as a shared patterns of behaviours and interactions, cognitive constructs, and understandings that are learnt by socialisation. Thus, it can be seen as the growth of a group identity fostered by social patterns unique to the group. To me, belonging, bringing a sense of home, is within culture also. For Aboriginal people, culture is home. That's this wonderful little book that this comes from Bill Neji from Alligator River. Our culture is in nature. If someone takes our culture, we get sick. Our culture is in small, simple things. The green underside of a mossy rock, the light on a leaf at different times of day, and the rainbow songline in the sky. We live in two cultures, land and spirit. My culture is now creation sites and massacre sites. Our culture was a democracy because everybody had the right to food and shelter. That was enshrined in our democracy. Heal the nation's broken culture. Bring us all home, Aboriginal and non. Jung on culture and home. Carl Jung's views emerged from the culture of the German-speaking world of the 19th century. Cultures of German Romanticism, pagan counterculture, and nationalism, which rose and fell in his home country. As the individual is not just a single separate being, but by his very existence has a collective relationship, it follows that the process of individuation must lead to more intense and broader collective relationships. Collective relationships embodying culture, culture embodying a sense of home. And then there's government and country as home. Referring to our first slide on, and it was interesting when I was writing this because when I got to this bit, I thought, I know, I'm just going to go straight to the first slide I made about home. And this is what seemed to me to be about government and country as home. It seems there is much home implied or wanted or inherent in the government and country we choose, as well adding in respected and shared core beliefs, ethics, morals, integrity, compassion, human rights, and equity. And so, to Unhomed in 2020. 2020 became the great unplanned contemplation and grief retreat. But some could not make it home to contemplate or retreat or safety through fire or hail or virus, not to their physical home structure, their towns, communities, their patch of beloved earth, even their countries. Many became dislocated from family, friends, work environments, colleagues, places of education, entertainment, healthcare, and worship. Many became distrusting and unhomed about their government, civic leaders, of democracy, and even of God. More subtly, unhoming occurred in ways of expression, both with how we use and include our body in communication, and with the meanings and choice of words we use. As our bodies became increasingly unhomed, so did our health and mental health and well-being, not to mention the unhoming of earth, fauna, and flora, and the unhoming of people from earth, fauna, and flora. There was an overarching, undoing, unknowingness within a reality of being taken apart and being out of our control, both as individuals and collectively. Odysseus, as we know, was also unhomed. By the end of the epic, the disorder of the house of Odysseus leads to incredible violence and almost ends in war. What unhoming did Jung experience? Jung went through a difficult and pivotal psychological transformation, exacerbated by the outbreak of the First World War. During World War I, Jung was drafted as an army doctor and was soon made commandant of an internment camp for British officers and soldiers. Jung worked to improve the conditions of soldiers stranded in Switzerland and encouraged them to attend university courses. This time of Jung's life has been described as a creative illness. Another deeply unhoming experience for Jung was his split with Freud, and then the deaths of his mistress and his wife. So what was unhomed in 2020? I think we can safely say that all the homes we have discussed were unhomed, from our physical structures to our governments, countries, and the earth. So I did invite people to bring their creative expressions from last year. I know a lot of people were in the lockdown were really focusing on expressing their experience and their grief about last year through their artworks, but or music or whatever it was, whatever is your expression. So I'm not sure if anybody did bring any up. Oh, you did. Good on you. What have you got? Of course.
No, during the lockdown, it was locked down, wasn't it? And one of the things I did in that time was learn a bit more about Jung. And the thing that sort of puzzled me was this idea of a collective
Excuse me, can the people on Zoom see if he stands over there? Would you like to come out?
So what I did,
Actually, that mic won't help you here and here. That's ready for the Zoom. This is this one.
oh wow, you think I need one?
No, not if you stand close.
Do you want me to hold it?
So what I did was, this is a photograph of a place not far from here, and it's actually called Reservoir Hill, which is just near Kaleen, and it was taken at the winter solstice, pretty much. This is my bicycle that I ride around, and I saw this vista, this great vista of sort of an emptiness, but also of life and existence. And so what I did with it, and it's sort of a big stretched panorama. This is the trig, and there's the sun behind the trig. And then this is actually the suburb of Kaleen, I think. And that's looking over towards the north, pretty much. Obviously that's in the west. So what I did was actually create this sort of electronic thing, which I took that and flipped it upside down and added it and made it negative. So it had this aspect of being, the whole thing is a collective unconscious. And also that it's that shadow, the both things come into it. Because I was just obsessed with both the collective unconscious, which I thought about a lot, and also the idea of the shadow, whether the shadow is anything. And of course it's not, it's an absence.
Yeah.
And yet you talk about it all the time. So that's what I did. I don't know if I can say anything specific about it. That's my little expression.
That's just wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I'm wondering if you wrote any music?
Sorry?
Yes, particularly. Yeah, okay. And we have an art therapist over here who's...
Yeah, I did quite a lot last year because I've been working with Cornelia from Victoria, doing courses with her. She's well known around the world. So she couldn't go overseas last year, so she did a lot of Zoom work. So I did some work with her and also with psychologists with some doing art therapy courses online, just like visiting her with a group, a small group online. So I'm doing that each week. And last year, I went to Central Coast quite some time and doing a lot of reflections on the sea, looking at the emotions of the sea and how it's, your human emotions can be drawn into the sea. So I think quite a lot of art therapy based on being drawn into the sea. And so a lot of it's sort of quite interesting because I think over a period of time to see where one was headed. And so it's like a journal. And I found that was quite good because at one stage I got quite depressed through the virus, carry on because it couldn't be involved with our families because our families live in Victoria. So Victoria was locked down from us last year and we couldn't do anything. We've done very much on a bit of Zooming. But, we have grandchildren there, so we couldn't really see them or be part of it. And it was quite sad because we had a new baby and we only saw her when she was a month old. And the last time we saw her, she was 14 months old. So that was quite a big chunk of time. So journaling with the art therapy was one way of keeping sane. And that's what kept my sanity and everything going. So, it was very powerful.
Yeah, thank you. Is anyone else? Yes? Oh, you've got one. Wonderful. You'll have to come out here so our Zoom people can share it as well.
Hold it while you talk. Hold it there.
Yep.
This is some children's art and it's showing an insect and it was definitely December. I remember that the young girl drew the insect, but then she started to fill the top of the painting with black and grey, and it got darker. And if I just read the story, it's just before Christmas, it says, trying to get home because it doesn't like rain. There's a storm in the sky. So after this, we continued. So this was December, January, February. We continued and made a bigger painting, this time with gangs. And one of the children suggested a lot of rainbows, and it's still got this insect motif and another motif of trees and another motif of flowers. But what was unusual was the flowers were made by tracing round some seashells, like pippies that we got at the coast. So this was sort of bringing the ocean up to Canberra at a time when we couldn't visit. Now the big artwork is not finished, and I couldn't work out anyway how to get it here, but it's not finished, and it's kind of got caught because I said to them, you know, what's going on now? And they said they thought the storm had got a bit better. So whether, I mean, I don't know, I'm not an artist. I really don't know if that means that no one has any incentive to complete the artwork because the need isn't there, or if it will get completed in its own time. But it's like something shifted.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Everyone can share. I'm so pleased people brought me out.
Something that happened for me was that I liked being home, and I couldn't go and visit everybody all over the place. And so it's a bit hard to see, but I started to make nests when I was at home. That's all. When I was gardening, I did a lot of home things. I settled into the home that me and my husband started building about 11 years ago, and I had to go to Melbourne for family and Queensland and all over the place anyway. But, excuse me. But I found that working in the garden, I started to, you know...
My hands in front of your face.
Sorry, okay. I started to use my prunings and just cut them up and shape them into nests, and it's just something that came and it gave me great pleasure, and it's the most artistic thing I've done in ages, even though I've been facilitating art groups for people with dementia for about 8 years before that. I really don't know, I can't describe it, but I still do get enormous pleasure out of chopping up compost and mulch into nests, and then I sort of leave them out to dry, and then I go and chop them up a bit more, and then I always finish by shaping them into a lovely nest, and it gives me great satisfaction and feeling of home, you know, so. Yes. What was that, nesting? Yeah, nesting. Well, I didn't do that with them. This is, you know, I did art. I facilitated the art group for about 8 years, and my art was the mess. I took photos of the easels because they slap a lot of paint around, and my art was the mess, it's not mess, but the colours that were left on palettes and paint pots and easels, and I took photos of those because that was my art. I did a little bit of watercolour myself, but not much, you know, and I found this was really quite an art form that it came as a gift, and I really enjoyed it. And they all get dispersed and put on the garden when they're small enough. They don't last. And then I found a real little bird's nest that had fallen out of a tree, so I kept that on a window ledge for a long time, and now that's back out in the garden. So,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Anyone else?
I collaborate with a friend in poetry.
Oh,
She's written something.
would you like to come out so you can be on Zoom?
So you can't see this, but she was talking about snails. and I'll just read it. When the rains come at last, snails spontaneously generate. They browse their way along the path towards our herbs, through spring-clean mornings where the air exhales the scent of dry yet living grass. I follow dribbles of light traced across the stones, cautious to avoid small tragedies, the crunch of delicate shells, the slow death bubbles of remorse. Through all this year of fire and hail and plague, I have, in some obscure way, longed for home, wherever and whatever that may be. But watching the timeless patience of the snails, I see that home is not a place, nor yet the fragile shells we carry on our backs, as the grey nomads do. Home is a coil of years, translucent dark, to which we can withdraw at will, where we are free to hide. Its only frame, our frame of mind, the stairs, the spiral universe inside. And that's by Tessa Morris Suzuki. Did you like that?
I'd love you to, yes, sure. I think you'll have to come here.
So this is a song that I wrote about 40 years ago, and it's, I suppose, expressing the sort of trauma of homelessness and Australian sense of spiritual identity. It's called The Rainbow Snake.
Right, could you come over here to the camera? Thanks.
Rainbow snake is alive today. So hey, brother, now sister, where do you come from? Your back is scarred, but not yet broken. Hey, brother, now sister, remember where you're from. The rivers, trees, and starry sky say get back to the land. The deserts cry, the mountains sigh, your heart is in the land. So hey, son, catch my shadow. The sun is smoldering, dirt, honey, brown. We take you down into the blue, golden fire. The rainbow snake is alive today. So hey, brother, now sister, where do you come from? Your back is scarred, but not yet broken. Hey, brother, now sister, remember where you're from.
Okay, yes, well, it certainly was the great unplanned contemplation and grief retreat last year. Okay, so I think we're going to have a break now and then we'll come back for rehoming.
Yes, we're rehoming. Feel at home with our hospitality over here and our hospitality in here. You can get a cup of tea, a coffee, or drinks, and have some lovely food over here. I'm sitting down now. I'm not a teacher for nothing. It's good to see some new faces. We have some new faces over here. It's, can you introduce yourself? Yeah. And he knew me from teaching days, from the, yeah. Well, I said to the kids, you know, they questioned me and I said, well, I've been out there nearly 50 years, dear. And they look at me and think, what? How could that be? I said, I still got the energy to deal with you. So don't. Yeah, so I said, yeah, so I said, don't. And I said, yeah, I said to them, don't harass me because you might have to stand in the corner. And they go, look at me. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. So they're all very good. So I'm very lucky. So still enjoy the time out there. Also enjoy being here with adults. So it's great. So I get the best of every world, I think. So we'd like to invite Valerie back again. And if you become a member, you can borrow those books and you can come along, you don't have to pay. So that's another good thing about becoming a member. And but you can borrow as many books as you want over there. So we'd like to continue on with Valerie. Question time, so you can ask all these questions around the place.
Okay, not quite question time because we are going to rehoming. So, what is rehoming and what to do to rehome? I've reflected on this and that I think it includes rebeing. That is, resurrecting what truly matters to ourselves and for the world. How did Odysseus rehome? It emerges that rehoming for him was much more than an epic journey home. We also see him urgently concerned with preserving home, just as our concern now is to preserve Earth. How did he do that? Perhaps it happened when he dressed as a pauper with humility and humbleness and learnt to understand his friends and foes and start again. How did Jung rehome? After World War I, Jung looked to other ways, other cultures, philosophies of thinking and being and doing. In 1925, he embarked on his Bugishu psychological expedition to East Africa. Here, he hoped to increase his understanding of Indigenous psychology through conversations with culturally isolated residents. The major insights, he concluded, had to do with himself and the European psychology in which he had been raised. Here, I see a parallel with us in the West, increasingly considering and turning to Indigenous practices. In 1937, Jung left Zurich again for an extensive tour of India, after which Hindu philosophy became an important element in his understanding of the role of symbolism and the life of the unconscious. And here we are, all with our artworks symbolizing our experiences. After his wife's death, Jung built again another tower, signifying an extension of consciousness achieved in old age. All these acts of his of rehoming were, of course, accompanied by his reflection, analysis, and writing. Perhaps the first step for us in rehoming is acknowledging and expressing our grief. Jung wrote much on grief and referred to it with the term the medieval alchemists used, the great mortificatio. There is much to be said about grieving, which we don't have time to go into tonight. But there are some of my sources: Experiencing the Mortificatio, The Soul in Grief, Jung, A Biography, and Afterlife. So, we have all experienced grieving manifestations in our life, waves of forgetfulness, sadness, loneliness, regret, magical thinking that we might turn back the clock or calendar, and inconsolability, along with emotional lability, surprising responses to life situations, the upsurge of old memories we thought we had let go of long ago, even concern that we might be losing our minds. I personally experienced many of these grief reactions throughout 2020. So where are we in rehoming? It seems to me we are continuing to move through the stages of grief, simply put by Healthline 2018, from shock, denial and disbelief, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, and into the upward turn, reconstruction and working through, acceptance and hope. Many voices are speaking to me on the upward turn, and they constantly land in my inbox. This one is from Linda Chapman from the Open Sanctuary in Tilba. She's a retreat leader, meditation teacher, spiritual director, and an oblate of the Benedictine World Community of Christian Meditation. As an environmental and social justice advocate, Linda recognizes the need to marry contemplation and action. She writes, "The Black Summer of 2019 and 20 and COVID appeared as apocalyptic events. The true meaning of the word apocalypse has to do with the revealing of something, and if we are not listening and looking, we will miss that which is being revealed to us." She says, "I believe we are experiencing a call to return and listen to innate wisdom." And it's so wonderful that so many of you are creatively expressing your innate wisdom. And here's another one that came to my inbox, called "Are We Being Called to Renaissance Thinking?" from a Jordanas Eel, who leads Civic Lab at New Profit, an initiative that invests in democracy entrepreneurs, building civic trust in America. She is the co-founder and international spokesperson for the Sister March network that mobilized 4 million people for the 2017 Women's March. Renaissance is a French word meaning rebirth, of course. It refers to a period in European civilization that was marked by a revival of classical learning and wisdom. History reminds us the Renaissance was born partly out of the bubonic plague that decimated Europe in the 14th century. While there was a multitude of factors that contributed to the transformation of European society after the plague, it is notable that that period elevated the value of the labor class, the Middle Ages ended, and a new era of critical thinking and cultural expression, albeit driven by elites, emerged. She calls us to Renaissance democracy and explains why. As we fight COVID-19, we must also remember that there is another virus, civic distrust, attacking our democracy. this virus must be eradicated through the birth of a new democratic vision centered around trust. Public policy comparisons have shown that countries that have had relatively successful COVID-19 containment strategies have higher levels of trust, both in the government and in their fellow citizens. Data shows that 43% of Germans have strong trust in their government, and South Korea experienced the largest one-year increase of trust in government by 17 points in 2018. New Zealand, where 59% of the public had trust in the government pre-COVID-19, has seen a massive surge in trust, now at 83%. Yardonis says the way to rebuild trust is through democracy entrepreneurship. This employs a range of strategies such as grassroots organizing, recruiting a pipeline of new and diverse leaders for public office, and building a narrative that counteracts misinformation and promotes unity. More importantly, the work of democracy entrepreneurs extends beyond election cycles. Other reconstruction and new knowledge voices calling in my inbox include Reset Restoring Australia after the pandemic recession. It's all about Ross Garnett, who they say is more a prophet than a gloomy economist. Then there's this one, the first National Convention for Community-Minded Independence. Oh, we missed the election for them. It's in February. The Glasgow Summit this November will be really focusing in on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and what they're going to do. Then there was the emergence of green faith. Because the earth and all people are sacred and at risk, green faith is building a worldwide multi-faith climate and environmental movement. Is anyone else's inbox or circles calling them or having things land in them?
It's interesting, Valerie, that all the photos of the people attending the community-minded independence are all women.
Yes. Yes, it is interesting. I don't know what happened to about that. That was in February. Yeah. Are you saying it is? We are excluded? Yeah. Okay. It's very sad. It's very sad. Yeah. Pardon? Mm. Mm. Anyone else? Yeah. So the thing is, what we're going to do with that nice feeling. Yeah. Mm.
Beautiful trees within the symbiosis, they keep them at home in transaction, they give them protein. So they work constantly. That's really the only reason that some of these forests are still huge, because of that symbiosis. And what I sort of was thinking about yesterday was that it sort of works like a city, because it's not just the only transaction. You know, you've got animals on top of the grass,
Mm.
land, and you've got things in the solid layers, then you've got the roots going down into the deep plants. It's still making life impact in the area. And it sort of works like a city, because everything has a transaction at some point. And there's almost an economy. There's been studies to say that trees actually transfer carbon to other trees, and you take a tax from the mycelium.
Mm.
So it's like just using your art connection, something like that, in environments and both.
Yeah, a natural sort of transaction.
Yes, but certain things do contribute to that at that point.
Yeah,
It's like everything does that. So
yeah,
in that transactional process, if you get it back to economics, the real problem that arises is greed, and in fact that leads to that very strong
mm.
unequal distribution of income, and the control of that. You really need to have a transactional system which isn't corrupt, because the current financial system is very corrupt. And trying to fight that, I don't think will work, but I think it can be replaced, and there are technologies that can replace that.
Yeah. Thank you. So, how?
Same thing with energy, the whole process,
There is no shortage of energy, because I'm actually a founding member of the Energy Change Institute at the ANU, and there is no shortage of energy. There's any
No.
amount coming from the sun. It's the way it's produced, the way it's used, the way it's distributed is the problem. There's plenty of energy.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, a transactional process.
Yes.
And it's only through being able to utilize that energy directly from the sun and not use the 100-million-year-old carbon that has been stored from the sun and then creating problems
Yeah.
that we have to change. There's plenty of energy.
So we'll
for
see
everyone.
what that organisation's going to do next.
Sorry?
We'll see what that organisation's going
Well,
to do next.
it has to be a bottom-up one, I think,
Yeah.
because it's not going to come from top down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I think maybe the relationship people have to the land, you know, in New Zealand and the government, I mean, in New Zealand, most New Zealanders are very, very conscious of like having beautiful waterways and clean forests and those things. And that's their home is that land.
Yeah.
And so the closer they have that connection to their rehomed land, the easier it is to actually make those types of changes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I had a slide up there, right, that said, go home to nature and let nature heal you. So exactly. Okay. So how do we choose how to rehome? How to rehome, reconstruct, how to work through. So back to Linda Chapman from Tilba. She says, we need to be informed by the silence of deep mind to become recentered in wisdom and the vision that recognizes we are one body. What we do to the least, we do to the whole. The world is desperately in need of wisdom, the wisdom of silence. We are constantly distracted by both interior and exterior noise. Start with silence. Then start with what gifts and possibilities are emerging in your own life. Ask yourself, what can happen through you? Start within and then think out. So I found this in Proverbs, in the Bible. These thoughts on how to build a house, a home. By wisdom, a house is built. Through understanding, it is established. Through knowledge, its runes are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. I will finish with a message of hope and acceptance about rehoming from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, a Jungian analyst, a Jungian psychoanalyst and author of Women Who Run with the Wolves. My friends, do not lose heart. I have heard from so many recently who are deeply and properly bewildered. They are concerned about the state of affairs in our world now. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most to civilized visionary people. Yet, I urge you, ask you, gentle you, to please not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially do not lose hope. We are all needed. That is all we can know. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send up flares, build signal fires, cause proper matters to catch fire. In summary, it seems the key rehoming words, concepts, ideas, a wisdom that recognizes we are all one body, hoping together, futuring together, knowledge, mend where we can, have faith in an accumulation of acts in the small things, courage and perseverance. And the last one is just my references. So would anyone like to share how you have been rehoming? Maybe what you've become involved with, what you might be reading more, what you might be feeling inspired to get involved with.
Well, rehoming is a search for a home.
Pardon?
I said rehoming is a search for a home.
Yes.
Yeah. And of the one which I've done, and wondering, I couldn't have, obviously my mind is running Edgar Allan Poe's Born from the Shadow, because I think it expresses what you were saying. We're really searching for a home, and that includes what you said about the earth. So, gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado?
Ride boldly, ride, the shade replied. You seek for El Dorado, over the mountains of the moon and down the valley of the shadow. A little bit enigmatic, maybe. That's what enigma is for, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I can't help but think about that really wonderful Australian film, which is so often, not really given due credit. The Castle. The Castle. That's also about rehoming.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot in it that I think can be overlooked. There's a lot there.
Yeah. Is anyone else? Yeah.
All the time that you've been talking, I've been thinking about the word homeless, which is a fact of life, All you've got is a trolley and that's your home. And what's been important to me, I think, is to think of what's a person. Homeless is a bad word. It's a bad word because probably they're more homely than we are, where we've got somebody to go or somewhere to go and have a shower and cook food. Whereas their Maslow's hierarchy of needs isn't being met really. That basic stuff, they've got to go somewhere and wait to have a shower, and they can only have a certain amount of time to have the shower. And what's been going through my mind is what is their idea of home? How can they be rehomed? Is it, all those heroes who go down to the depths of the earth to be able to find themselves? And are they them? Or, because, let's face it, they've got a bloody bad run sort of thing. And to me, the whole time that you've been speaking, I've been thinking, yeah, but what about them? When you're unhomed,
All the
and when we
time.
talk unhomed, I mean unhomed. There's nowhere to go. What's their idea of home? And is that something that, if we could discover what that is, then we will probably be able to understand it more ourselves. If we can go to that, when I say level, I don't mean level, but if we can go to that situation and really get there,
So
then
it
do we
sounds-
discover what home is
Yeah.
or not?
It sounds like it's something that's calling you to go and be involved with homeless people.
That's indeed why I'm saying it, because I am.
Oh, wonderful.
And I have the deepest respect for them, the deepest respect. Sorry.
'Cause really they're
Tears in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're living unhomed all the time, aren't
That's
they?
right, and they can't. What resources have they got to rehome? I don't,
Yeah. So
I mean, I don't want to be all Pollyanna-ish about it, sort of thing.
So I
But
think,
the whole time you've been talking, I've been thinking, yeah, but what about them?
yeah. So I'm glad you came, and I hope that that might be some little opening for you there. Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing. So, anyone else been called in a particular direction to? Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. 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 So there might be some clues in there in your passion about that, about what you might like to be more involved with, maybe. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking through your talk today of when I was about 10 or 12, ABC had a show called Home, and it was about an orphanage, just a boarding house, where young kids had sort of, who were displaced and, abandoned, had sort of come to have a home. And the thing that they used to say in that show all the time was basically, home is where the heart is.
Yes.
And that's kind of, that relationship to home is, I don't know, that's what I've been, it's a very simple thought, but I've been thinking
Yeah.
about through your talk.
Mm. Yeah. That's why it's often not a simple answer, is it? As where is home? Because your heart can be. Yeah. Yeah. And that can be in many physical locations, perhaps. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else got passionately involved in anything in their going out into the world and rehoming?
Oh, yes, I think we shouldn't let the discussion end without some reference of the greatest unhoming that's occurred for hundreds of years with the issue of refugees.
Uh-huh.
You know, after when the UNHCR was established after World War II with a couple of million refugees, there was a great effort with the Marshall Plan and all this sort of thing to get people reorganised. And it was thought that the UNHCR would have a lifespan of a couple of years, maybe 5 years after the war, to get people back to whatever home they could establish themselves at. And of course, it's been tragically moved in the other direction to the extent that now there's maybe 60 million refugees in the world, internally and externally displaced. Some few of them, very few in this country, and a few more in the Manus Island and so forth. So anyone who feels strongly about that can come along to the Palm Sunday rally on
Yeah,
the week.
that'll be good. That'll be a good one.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
It's 1 o'clock in Garima Place.
That's the one.
Is it this Sunday?
Another week.
28.
Oh, the one after.
End of the month.
Yeah. Okay. Nina's nearly got a hand up.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I think I just want to point to your first stop point. I think for me, I've personally taken action on stretching a broader network around connecting humanity. So women have been particularly affected by COVID around the world. So Yeah, so I launched a company 2 weeks ago to help build stronger networks for women to help around their economic empowerment, and how we can reimagine a more feminine view of the world in terms of its recovery and its growth, and just to challenge some of the paradigms that our economic models are grown around. So, and I've been really humbled by how many people have been really encouraged by thinking differently about how we can reconnect when things have been pulled apart. And whilst we can't physically connect, things have gotten closer, which I have found quite encouraging for humanity. So for me, rehoming has been about reimagining
Yes.
what is the concept of the connection of where is your heart, you know, connecting to someone else you haven't met yet.
Yeah. And I must say, you've been very quick off the mark doing that. And huge congratulations are in order to Nina for that initiative. And I was going to say something else about that. Oh, you would be very interested in the woman in America that I spoke of with the Renaissance thinking. Yeah. I'm just curious what people thought about that whole concept of we're in a Renaissance. We have the opportunity for Renaissance thinking. You know, looking back to the first one and following the bubonic plague, and now here we are in another cycle of that. Yeah. I was very taken with that concept that we have all that opportunity right now to change the thinking, to, reimagine. Yeah. 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 All of that. And so that's where we go back to the silence and the contemplation and the innate wisdom, and then we go from there into what we can do in our own patch. So it might be, you might be up for an electric car soon. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed very much preparing it, the talk, and thank you.